Welcome to the Independence by Design podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a business owner and ways to get unstuck from the day-to-day so we can design a business that gives us a life of independence. So it's been like 4 years, and you just said, why don't you just repeat it, John? I thought it was fantastic. What are you doing right now?
So I'm doing whatever I want is the short answer. And so that means to me trying a lot of different things, seeing what is interesting, seeing what makes me happy, checking some things definitely off, kind of like the life to do bucket list professionally. Writing a book was a really big one, so I'm happy to have done that already.
That's awesome. And so I got so many questions. And I want to talk to you about your book because obviously there was a lot that went into it. You and I talked years ago, and I think it was fairly fresh after you'd sold. And it's so fascinating, John. Now that I've been doing this for a decade, I've come to realize that well, personally, I've gone through it, but also like there's a process that unfolds afterwards, and you wrote a book about it, Beyond the Exit. But could you have done this any other way?
No, no, I don't think so. And you know, part of me went through when, after I'd sold my business and then I worked there for 2 years and I got out of it, and um kind of went through what I detail in the book about like the journey, the part of the journey that's like unpleasant, which is figuring out what do you do now that you have unlimited time when you are the kind of person that needs to be busy? What do you do that when you are a person who frankly needs to be high status and you've gone from successful founder CEO to unemployed person? Like you may be wealthy unemployed person, but you're an unemployed person, right? So I thought when I was going through those things, like, oh man, I've like messed this up somehow. And then when I started to talk to more people who had gone through that, um, basically everyone I met has gone through that transition, and it's always a hard transition. So, to your question, like, could I have done it better? Like, well, equipped with the information that I have now, like, I think I could have done it better, but I don't think that there's a good way to make it easy. I think that it's one of those life transitions that's going to be difficult.
Um, I appreciate you sharing that because I've spent 10 years trying to figure out the words, whether it's a process or what to reach people. I mean, like here's my way of describing it, John, is it's the matrix, right? I mean, like there is no spoon, and everybody's arguing about the spoon, what color it is, what shape it is. And I say that because once you see it, then you can't unsee it. But then it's the process of taking the goddamn pill that's a lot of work. And like we continue to go back to the blue pill instead of the red pill. And I just interviewed my friend Rob Dubay. He's partners with Gino Wickman at the 10 Disciplines.
Oh yeah,
And
right on.
yeah, and so like Rob had like he's dear friends with Bo Burlingham. And so like I mean all the different people that you and I have circled it around to, John. And I say this because he sits on the board of his company now with Image One. Didn't have to sell it, but like he wrote a book called Do Nothing and about like eliminating the ego. And we talked all about like, mindfulness for, an hour. And I say that because like, I think that's generally true with what you said, where like going through it is usually the only way that people can handle it. And so like, what would you have like, when you said that you could have been more equipped to handle it differently? Like, what would you have like, what is it? Like maybe walk me through and like what did you struggle with the most? And then like what could you have potentially gone through a little bit like in a lighter process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what I went through, and which I now know is totally common and normal, is number one, you lose the identity that you had. And that feels like a couple things for entrepreneurs. So, number one, again, it feels like your status goes down overnight. The busyness that surrounds entrepreneurs that we invite into our life, because it's like what we secretly want. Like entrepreneurs secretly want to be busy, right? Like we do this because we want to be the people who are working 60 hours a week and who wake up in the middle of the night thinking about their business. That's what we want to be. And then I'll never forget this. The guy I interviewed, and I wrote about in the book, but he gives this great line, which is, he sold his business and he finished his obligations to the business like on, Friday, whatever, 5 p.m. Goes and has his weekend. Monday morning, he comes into his office and he says he's literally like rearranging like the pens and the folders on his desk, right? He has to go, he has to go to work and he has to feel busy at work because that's who he is, right? And that's who we are. And so you lose that right away. And so that's I think a big part of it. I think that it's when you're running a business and trying to grow the business, like you know what you should be doing in life, like you should be doing those things, right? And I think that people get a lot of meaning out of it, out of running their business, and then that goes away. And that goes away like almost overnight, and you have to start thinking about what is actually important to you in your life. And so that kind of transitions to the second half of your question, which is like, what could I have done? What could people do? And so I write about a bunch of tools in the book, and I'm happy to kind of jump into them, and I think they're really good. But the really high level of it is that people need to think hard about what they're going to do after they sell, and they have to do it before they get into the process, right? Because once you're like in the sales process, like once you've signed like your LOI, your life doesn't belong to you until you close, right? Because you're trying to run your business like you normally have, with extra pressure, right? Because if your business tanks during that process, like you go from having like, well, it sucks when your business tanks to like, well, I've lost all of my wealth like permanently. Like you're not going to get the deal if your business tanks. And then you're also trying to sell the business, which is also a full-time job. Um, you're just dealing with too much at that point to say like, well, I'm going to take a week and go to like a cabin in the mountains with no electricity or whatever and figure out what to do with my life. You have to start that process before it. So when I speak to entrepreneurs, like I'm speaking tomorrow to to a big group of EOers. I was an EO myself. Um, when you're in that situation that you haven't sold your business, like you're still running it, that's the time. That's the time to start thinking through and like going through a process, going through a bunch of visioning exercise. And happy to again to talk about the exercises, but that's really the time to do it before you sell. What I found was that the worst time to plan for what to do with your life is immediately after you sell, because I see this phenomenon over and over, which is like, and I guess let me step back. When I say sell, I kind of mean it in a unique way because like there's a day when you've sold your business where the money comes. Yeah, you can say that that's like the day that you sold your business, but to me, the day that you sell your business, it feels more like the day that you actually finally step away. And Bo Burlingham has this great line, which you'd mentioned, Bo, which is you're going to exit your business one way or another, even if it's in a body bag, right? At some point in the future of humanity, like you will not be in your business. And that's really the point where it's hard because so many people, like me, sell to private equity and agree to stay running the business. So your life kind of stays the same, except more of your wealth is liquid. But the day
But
that
you
for
don't have
one,
control.
you don't have control. Yeah, that's true. And that's a big thing I talk about. I talk about that. But like the day that you are just like, I've had enough of this, I'm done. Like you have to know what happens the next day. And that's the dangerous time, right? Because that's the time where you like are kind of like lashing out at the universe to figure out how do I get that back. And the number one way that entrepreneurs try to get that spark and that identity back is they try to start a business right away, and they try to start a business that's as close to the business that they just sold as they possibly can without violating their non-compete or whatever. And that to me, from my research, is like the number one path to misery is thinking that you have to be in this cycle of I'm going to sell my business and then like, oh my God, I got to have another business right away because I can't sit in a quiet room with myself for 3 months.
Hmm. Yep.
Sorry, that's a mouthful,
Uh,
but that's
no,
that's
no, no. I
that's what I
love it.
learned.
It's just giving to give us a launching pad because so let me resonate with everything you said, and you can tell I was an hero too. Like I resonate. um, and I'm curious, John, on what your takes are on some of the ways that I've articulated this conundrum because I've spent a decade on the same topic as you, and um, I call it when I speak now, I call it my 10-year therapy session. So thank you all for attending. And so, uh, um, okay. So here's my takeaway. And I spoke at Small Giants last year talking about this. And okay, because I got the exit planning certification, the value building certification, started 3 companies, all this. I did all the things that you're talking about wrong, right? Like, in what I've learned is that the word exit is completely effed, and it like it doesn't resonate with people because I've tried to help people, but then it's like, what are we exiting? And like what happens is like I one of my companies that I found, it was called growth and exit planning, and like I completely engineered a business that no one wanted to work with. It was like all the people that were exhausted and burnt out and wanted to put lipstick on a pig and get their retirement amount, but weren't willing to put the time and energy in. And all the people that I wanted to work with that I could help were like, I don't want to sell yet. And so here's why I'm saying, and when I say F, because like I think it's unbelievably important to talk about, but I think there's a layer of nuance. I guess what I'm arguing for is you have a W-2 job, and then you have an asset with free cash flow distributions and equity. I mean, private equity doesn't buy companies for a job. And so like what I like the word independence, and I think a lot of people that I'm working with want time, and they want time to feed that dopamine system of their ego or their identity or their personal growth or meaningful relationships, but they get stuck in a job. And so it's trying to identify, it's kind of like this double click with the blue pill, red pill, like I was talking about. And I'm curious on like what your thoughts are on this, because I completely agree. The moment that someone's out of energy, it's game over. And like bad decisions are made, and like the identity and all the stuff that you just said comes harder than it should be. So like, I'm just curious on what you think about like how I'm phrasing that, because I've tried so hard to get across to people before, and people are like, I'm not going to freaking sell. So like, I don't want to think about this shit. Same thing with estate planning and all the other stuff. But like coming at it from a time lens and an asset lens with options becomes slightly more inviting for a conversation, is what I found.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And it's interesting what you say about, people who are totally, burned out and just kind of want to get out of it. And for my research, I talked to a bunch of people who are in a situation like that, who just like wanted to kind of be done. And what I learned was like they get out of their business, they get their retirement amount or whatever. And some people are happy with it, and especially, you don't like to generalize about people by age, but like if you're 70 years old, it's like socially acceptable for you to like retire and go play golf and pickleball,
It's
whatever.
easier from the outside world.
It's
Might
easier
still
from
be
the
hard
outside. Yeah,
inside,
that's
right?
exactly
But like,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
that's exactly right. So you may still want that from the inside. And then if you're a younger person, and I write about this a lot in the book, right? The number one question that entrepreneurs get, like if you're at a cocktail party or a picnic or a barbecue or whatever, you say, "Oh, I just got out of my last business." Someone says, "What's next?" And no one ever asks like, "Oh, how are you going to enjoy golfing or whatever?" Like, what's next implies that you're going to do another thing. It implies that the thing that you're going to do is going to be bigger and better somehow, right? Like that's the expectation that society has for us. And so whether you were desperate to sell your business, or whether were ambivalent about it, but you did it because, you wanted to get the money, which is totally acceptable. Society wants you to do something bigger and better, kind of regardless of what you want to do or not. And that's that tension is really problematic for a lot of people, I think.
I agree with you, and I've come to the same conclusions. And to what I've found is, well, first of all, retirement is bullshit.
Yeah.
Like anybody,
Yeah,
like
we don't want to
anybody
do
that's
that.
watching their parents,
Yeah,
it's just
it's
it
terrible.
was made up by the Social Security Administration with the FDR, like made up. Like I think you name a religion and name anybody that has half a brain. It's like we need meaning. We need to wake up and we need to do something with a purpose. I think, and this is why what I've tried to do, John, is I've tried to hone in on like time. I don't give a shit what you do, but like identifying what you want to do with that time and the impact that you want to make. We have to make cash flow, and then we have to have equity. So understanding how the business as an asset fits into that time is like what I've honed in on, because like, people might get addicted to the dopamine of like fixing fires and, doing stuff and creating stuff. And then they get bored with the business or they get exhausted, whatever it is, they want something different, but they're tied into that job. So what ends up happening, I've seen, is like people disproportionately went out of the job. Well, the company ain't worth shit if you need to be working. So like, it's like and it's like all of the stuff that you need to do to get out are also all the things that you need to do to sell. And so like what you like by that time it's so trapped. So it's like identifying what we want to do with time and can we afford to buy back that time out of our job so you can do whatever you want yeah, it's just do whatever you want. And back to like when you were going through your process before selling, like what options, like what were the reasons you got to that point? So like we're like give us some like the mindset of John back before you decided to get like what was that triggering event mentally or what was that feeling like? And then what were the things that you explored?
Um, I had the same problem that most entrepreneurs have, which is that I owned almost all of an extraordinarily valuable business entity and had no actual money. Um, right?
Yeah,
Which
I'm
is
sorry to laugh because
yeah,
I did one where I called balance sheet rich, cash poor.
exactly. And look, I mean, my business was quite successful. So we were making millions of dollars, and some of that flows directly to me, and that's great. And that's better than 99% of the people in this world. But I grew up middle class. Like my parents were both. My mom was a high school teacher. My dad was a college professor, like a commuter university. So I never, growing up, like I never like was hungry or anything, but we were very middle class. Like there's lots of things that we didn't have. And then, I, went through school and I started a business, and like, you don't make very much money when you start a business, and for a while at least. And then, ultimately I just got to this point where I just needed to get some financial stability. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are at that point. So it was, it was less about like, oh, I'm tired of doing this, or I need to go make meaning for something else in my life. It was just like, at some point, like you just have to get some money for your family, bluntly, and that's where we were.
Okay, so super helpful. So here's my question for you, and which is why I created one of my businesses. If you could have seen, so let's say you had your income statement, your balance sheet, your cash flow statement tied together, and you said, "Hey, by the way, John, here's what your company is right now, and in 2030, here's where you'll be," and you could see your cash flow from operations and your distributions while a CEO is running your company, while your working capital is involved, and you could like literally see, hey, we're going to take this company to from A to B. Here's how much it's going to cost to invest, and I mean, if you like, I can get my income that I want. Would there have been a desire to keep it? How come?
No. Um, because of risk. It's
So
it's
as an
all
asset,
it's all about risk. Yeah. So in the industry that I was in, I'd studied just like everyone else. I'd studied my industry really carefully. And so, it's industry. It was 100 years old. Um, and what I'd seen was that there's a couple companies that were able to stay at the top. That were 100-year-old companies, and everyone else went up and down. So there was never a company that, grew 8% a year, every year, forever. And sometimes it's flat, sometimes it's up 12%. And that's what you would like to see, right? Like if you own a business asset, like you own like a bunch of like tire stores or something, like an asset where people need tires every year, no matter what. Maybe it's more stable, like having never run a tire store, like I don't know. But our business wasn't stable. And if you would have shown me like, okay, you've grown 10% a year or whatever for the last 10 years, um, in my mind, like, yeah, that could go up, that could go way up, or that could go way down. And at some point, you just have to have the money like for your children to eat and to go to college and stuff.
Totally understood. Super helpful. So, because like what I've identified, there are three main constraints: time, cash flow, and wealth. Because like if someone wants one thing, so if someone says I want more time, it's like, well, you're gonna probably have to buy that back. It'll cost you cash flow. Or if you created more cash flow, you'd slow down the equity growth because you have to fund that. So I always say that, like I don't tell anybody what to do, but like here's what you want and here's how it impacts your time, cash flow, wealth. And so like what I'm hearing is that there was risk in the asset, therefore you made a decision. But I think it's important to note that you said like, if you had a different kind of company, I mean, I have commercial cleaners that I work with, or electrical contractors, or people that have like, but by having that lens, it's like, okay, what are we actually solving for? Right. Because like in understanding that, right? Like, what are you solving for? And then having the eyes wide open saying like, this is a economic decision because of the risk of this asset, and I want to capitalize on this now versus later. I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think there's one more facet of that. So you had said equity value, time, and cash flow. There was one which I didn't understand at the time, and I think you can only understand in retrospect, which is you could say it's meaning, or you could say it's contribution. But there's a factor where I think, and maybe it's like getting to a certain age, like maybe it's like, you and I have gotten to a certain age, right? Where like, like people start having health problems. Like we probably each have, friends or at least acquaintances who haven't made it, past their early 40s. And you start to look around, I think, and say, what's the contribution that I'm going to make to this world? And I think for some people, it's like, look, if you own a business, you employ people and you pay them a fair wage, and you're like, you volunteer your community once, every quarter or whatever, like that's great. That's fine. And like, I think it's a big contribution, but I think that's the other part of it is like, at some point there's other things that people want to do in life, or at least for me, like there was other things I wanted to do in life.
So, okay, I'm tracking you. I did this one podcast in um, Tana Green, and I call it like using your business for impact. I mean, conscious capitalism. I had Alexander on the podcast, and like Bo with Small Giants. And so here's how I would capture that. So I've got you ever seen that My Life in Weeks poster?
Yeah, oh, yeah. I've seen that. Yep.
I got that right there. I got myself to 100, and then I got a check, a box for every week, and then I drop dead. So like how I would, why I landed on time, John, is that I don't give a shit what you do with your time. But I think like then when we double click on the time, because like there's a lot of different ways you can get your cash flow, right? So if you get cash flow from real estate, you might not need it from your company. So then you got your wealth, you got a whole lot of like, that's the whole wealth, it's the whole cash flow. And then with your time, it's double clicking. And then I've got three things that I've identified, which is personal growth. We need to always have personal growth. The second one is meaningful relationships. And then the third one is lasting impact.
Yeah.
And so with our time, we have to do those three things. Otherwise, most likely you'll be unhappy.
Yeah.
And so then totally it's about, the way I've figured out is like, okay, how do we then identify how we want to get those three things out of our time? And then the time comes in, well, do you have a job, or are you the investor making your company through distribution, or your income through distribution? So I say that because I totally agree with you. And I think I've got a couple clients right now where it's like their desire to make the impact because they are controlling their company right now is higher than if they sold their business. So if they actually took less money doing an ESOP up front, or something else, then they can continue making the lasting impact with personal relationships and do a strategy of M&A on the board, but they can't get as much money up front at closing as if they were to sell to private equity or a third party. So therefore they're getting less. So that's back to the trade-offs. And it's kind of like thinking in the matrix, like, because I think it's like what you're saying is so damn important. And I just have struggled for a decade trying to get these messages through to people, going like, if you think, just like sit down and think right now. The best part is we live in America and we can design our freaking life. Like if we just think about the right stuff.
I would totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And I think that the saddest thing to me is seeing an entrepreneur who doesn't believe that. An entrepreneur who hasn't read, the E-Myth and thinks that they need to be working in their business and like putting out fires all the time. That to me is sad, because what I learned from doing this research and talking with, dozens and dozens and dozens of post-exit founders is that most post-exit founders have nostalgia for running their company. So you're in this situation, which is like every religion has warned us about this situation, right? Where people who are on one side of divide think it's going to be greater, their life is going to be great on the other side. And then once they get to that side, they realize their life was great on the first side, right? So there's this grass is greener problem, where if you're not putting in the work to figure out how to be happy, you're not going to be happy. As an entrepreneur, as a post-exit, wealthy person, you have to work to be happy at both of those things.
What do you think people, in your experience when you're interviewing these different people, what was the nostalgia about?
I think so. overwhelmingly people are nostalgic for kind of like the 0 to 1 million phase of their business where it's them and maybe they have a co-founder and then maybe they have like 3 to 5 employees, and either they're like building the first version of their software if they're SaaS entrepreneurs, or if they're service entrepreneurs, like they're doing a bunch of the service implementation themselves. People miss that, and when the business got substantially larger, like when there were like kind of like two levels in their business away from the people actually doing the real work, they started to not like it as well. So that's kind of the part that they're nostalgic for. And to me, one of the things I learned, I didn't know this before, but talking with so many people, and especially talking with like people who are older than me, like people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, was there's so much nostalgia for our childhood that comes out as we age. And so a lot of people said something really similar, like whatever they did as a kid that they loved, like they would say, they'd say, I was never going to make it to the major leagues, but boy, did I love playing baseball, when I was a little kid, like 10 years old in little league. And when I had, 12 people in my company, it felt like little league. Or, they'd say, I love the theater. And, when we put on a production of, Gone with the Wind or whatever, that was like one of the highlights of my life. And that's what it felt like to have, 18 people in my company, like a little group of like pirates kind of going to change the world. And so a lot of people that were successful after their exit, like who did cool stuff after their exit, figured out ways to replicate that in meaningful ways. Like people would say, I'm not trying to make a bigger company. I'm trying to make a company that I enjoy more. And I've got a bunch of examples of that where that
Mhm,
actually
mhm.
worked out.
Super fascinating. Makes like it goes back to just thinking about it because I've been really stuck where I've landed on the first principles of the time, cash flow, and wealth because it's like people are thinking through what are we solving for, right? Because like I mean, I'm assuming and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the second time they're doing that, they're not eating shit with no cash flow and living off of ramen, right? So you go like, I mean, it's it's back to like, I mean, how many people say, well, I love grandkids because like I can be present and then I get to give them back. I mean, that's kind of like what it is with the second company, but like, I look at my dad, I'm like, well, I've been building a business while you have been kind of semi-retired. So like it's a little bit different because you've got more time and money. And so I think about like just managing the time, cash flow, and wealth constraints appropriately can help us think through like what are we actually solving for? Because you've ever, I mean, did you interview anybody where like they were crazy successful, and it's like their whole life is a dumpster fire,
Oh
and
yeah.
like
Oh, totally.
they will
Totally.
figure out at some point that that doesn't
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of people where having a business was holding their life together, because you could look at someone and say, "Damn, they're successful because they are the CEO of $100 million business," but slightly under the surface, like they're on the verge of a heart attack. Their wife is about to leave them. They haven't seen their kids in a month. Like they're oftentimes abusing alcohol or prescription drugs or whatever. Like that's like a story as old as time for sure.
Right, right. Well, and that's where what are you? I know it's so fascinating to me, John, because like back to why I asked you the first question, which is there any other way to go through this? Like, I mean, the whole point of life, in my opinion, is the experience. The experience is the point, and relativity is what allows us to determine whether it's going well or not going well based on what we want. And so, like, is there a way to like think through this before making irrational decisions? Because like you might have a good company. Like in your situation, you were scared of the asset. And that's
Mhm.
I shouldn't have said it like that.
Oh no, I
You
think
had
it's a fine way to say it. I would agree.
okay, it's concerned about the risk of the asset going forward for the maximum value for your family. Like if that's what you're solving for, it's like that makes sense. But then I've got like because like when I'm challenging my clients, it's like I don't give a shit what you do. I literally don't care. But like if you have a kick-ass business that has a lot of a decent amount of cash flow and your equities here, like, and there's enough cash flow to reinvest and hire a president for 250 or 300 grand. And you put it in a playbook that says, hey, like you can literally manage this company from the board room and you don't have to be in the business. Like there's a lot, like it's half my clients where it's like, shit, I don't need to sell this thing if I can put that structure into place so I can free up my time. And then there are other people where it's like, dude, yeah, you have actual risk in your industry. And like there are like economic reasons, just like a family office would want to sell an asset if there's risk. But just kind of like thinking like that, it doesn't change the fact that you have to do all the hard work you're talking about.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like that still has to be done, but it's not like when you know, title 2 or chapter 2 or the runaway train, you're not doing it in the middle of that firestorm.
Right.
Well, everybody's making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of you getting a deal done.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the worst time to make decisions. It really is.
Yeah. What are some more interesting stories that you heard when you were interviewing people?
I heard so many. It was incredible.
How many people what was the total amount of people you interviewed?
So I formally interviewed about 70 people. And now I would say, like, as I've been kind of doing promotion of the book, I probably have spoken to 200 plus post-exit people now. So like, more than half of them are not in the book, but like are in my head.
Start a podcast, man.
A good start a podcast. Yeah, I thought about it. There's so many that were interesting. Like some of my favorites were, I talked to a guy who had a big like tech consulting firm, like back like in the 90s, where he would go into companies and implement, SAP or like their CRM or whatever, and that was big business. That got bought, and then for like 8 years, like 8 or 10 years, he didn't do anything in business. Like he said, like he was talking about
Peter?
No, Jim.
Jim, okay,
because Jim's in the back. Yeah, he's all the way in the back. Okay. So, like he talks about how he would drop his kid off, and then like there's like a group of people who would just meet for coffee every morning, just like how you go to like McDonald's, there's like 10 old men in there. Like he would just do that every day, and he loved it. And then he was saying that he loved, since he was a little kid, he loved like pocket knives. Like he loved to like collect them and look at them and whatever. And so he meets these guys at this like pocket knife show from like Denmark, I think it was. And they're making some knives and like selling them and like not really getting the value for their craftsmanship. So he partners with them, starts this knife company. And I don't know if this is weird, but I always do it. I hold up the knife. I bought the knife that I got from his company.
I love it. What kind of knife?
Oh, yeah. So his company is called Giant Mouse. And he won Blade of the Year at, whatever the big knife show is. And they're Inc. 500. So his new company is very successful, but like, think about that. Like, think about whatever you loved as a kid, whether it's like, baseball or Pokemon cards or like, theater or whatever, like you get to do that now, right? You get to do that now in the lens of, creating a business, creating whatever you want. But that's one of my favorite stories is, a guy just like figured out, this is the thing that I like, and I'm just going to go do it. And he did it. It's amazing.
Why do people wait? I don't know.
Yeah.
Why did you wait? Or was it, or did you love what you were doing? It was just the economic asset that you had concerns about.
I don't think I loved the people in my company. I don't think I loved the work that we were doing necessarily. Like it was fine, but like I think of it as like some people are making widgets, and I was making widgets, and that's fine, right? Like having a company and employing people and providing services is like in my mind, like that's like a positive thing. But some people just really figure out like, how do you put those together? I met another guy who was similar, who he had a company and they made like model ships. Like if you like go to Amazon and search like shipping a bottle or something, like it's the company that makes those. Yeah. And awesome. So he had that company and he sold it. And after he sold it, they were like, you don't really need to stay on. Like we don't really need you to run this company, but you can if you want. And so he said what he wanted to do was he went from CEO to like customer service representative. And so he like goes on like forums and like answers people's questions about shipping a bottle or whatever. Cause that's just what he loves.
I love it. Bob's Red Mill. You ever heard of this?
Yeah. I eat that.
Yeah. So he did an ESOP, and cause he was in the food space, with my, ex-partners, my last business. And, yeah, he did an ESOP, and Bob is like 90 years old and he dresses up in a costume to go to trade shows because he still freaking loves it. And so like, I think it's great too. And like, John, so here's my question. And I'm interested to hear your opinion because you've talked to so many people too. Is like, I just don't understand because like the typical DNA of an entrepreneur is risk taker doing hard shit to get to an outcome. And like, I guess since I've been a child, dude, like I just want to do whatever I want to do. And like, so that's been baked into my DNA of like if you were to look at the through line of everything that I've done, it's just, I want complete freedom to do whatever I want with my time. And like, if anybody needs me, it's messed up. And like that, therefore it's a problem if people need me. I want people to want me. And so like the systems and the process and the companies and stuff that I've done is like to facilitate my freedom of time. And so like, I just find it so fascinating that the people that take all the risk and do all the hard stuff that we talk to allow themselves to be trapped. It's
I think
fascinating to me.
it's interesting that you feel freed from that. When I look back at like my childhood, I'd mentioned like my parents were teachers, and they're dead now, so they won't mind me saying this. But like every at least every week, if not every night, they would just bitch about their jobs, and I don't think that that was unusual. I don't think it was even particularly negative. Like my mom's a high school teacher. That's a hard job. It's hard to
Yeah,
manage,
yeah, yeah. It's like the
200
whole
high
rich dad,
school
poor
kids every
dad
year.
kind of
It's really hard.
concept, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and they worked because they needed to make money to eat, and that's what 99% of people do, and 99% of people really don't like it. And so I think that part of that is in our almost cultural DNA as kind of like descendants of the Puritans or whatever in the United States. It's like work is supposed to be hard and work is supposed to be unpleasant, and if you're able to escape that, like you're 1 in 100 or whatever. And that's built into us as entrepreneurs. And I think that a lot of us,
Fascinating.
really want
Yeah.
to be doing work that's like almost want unpleasant work. And it's just, and
So
that doesn't have to be that
fascinating.
way. You could do
So
a different thing.
fascinating. I think there's a lot of truth to what you said. And I'm having like, this is why I'm enjoying this conversation, because you want to hear why I'm built the way I am.
Of course. Yeah. Of
This will be,
course. I want to hear it.
yeah, this will be some interesting contrast. So my dad, second or third grade twice, barely graduated White Bear Lake High School, went to Mankato State and ran out of booze and weed money. He'll be self-described as that. And then it was selling credit card machines and then selling calling cards. I remember STS calling cards, and then he landed on copiers, and like, so like since I was a child, John, there's like only a couple of things that drive my head. It like drive my brain. It's like, why are we here? What's the point? So that's why I love the philosophical, like I have to figure it out. Otherwise I don't know how to behave. And my dad, we were driving in the car and I was like 7, and he had just started our family business, and he mortgaged our house, bought a couple $100,000 worth of copiers. And he was like, you can do whatever the hell you want for the rest of your life. Your school is just, and like, so I got beat into me that the whole system screwed up. And as long as you take risks and do provide value to others, then you can do whatever you want. So like, since I was a child, it's like, you can do whatever you want. You just have to make sure you're providing value to the world. So like, when I'm not enjoying myself, I will like, or reorganize everything, because I just kind of like got ingrained in my operating system. Like, you don't have to put up with bullshit. And so it's just like so fascinating, because
Yeah.
does that make
It's so
sense? It's like,
yeah, no, it's so interesting. And what's so interesting about it is if you think about the way that I don't want to say our society, I guess the society that I'm most familiar with, like whatever the middle class, upper middle class, Midwest society is like the goal, if you can do it, is you go through high school and you go to like a good college, and then you go to a professional school or you go to work. And what are the top professions? The top professions are doctor, lawyer,
lawyer,
investment
engineer. Yeah.
banker, and then like
Yeah.
high level like corporate Fortune 500 executive.
Yeah.
And those are the four groups of people who now, like as a 42-year-old person who lives in like a wealthy neighborhood, all those people that I know are miserable, right?
I
Like
totally, I know. I agree. Yeah.
yeah,
And
there's like
doesn't that
there's no one
suck?
more miserable than like doctors now. Like right, like no one more
The
miserable
dental, I
than
heard dentists have like
awful.
one of the highest suicide rates too. I
Yeah,
know.
that doesn't
So,
surprise me to hear it.
um, oh, it's so fascinating, isn't it? Because like, yeah, it like hearing it from my dad, and I haven't appreciated it. And you even are helping me even think through it. It's like I just don't have any patience for just bullshit. Like, I will take in, but like what I've learned is like, if I'm going to like, if you again, but if you were to look at my through line, it's like all of the risks that I've taken is to optimize my time. Everything, every single thing. And it's like, but I've sacrificed cash flow and balance sheet over the years, but like, I don't care as long as I can maintain that. But like, what's fascinating, back to like the question I had for you, is like, how many people just accept like, I'm trapped and this is how it's supposed to be. And like, one of my best friends from college, he runs a rental company and I love him to death. And God bless you if you're listening in, because you know who you are. And I was like, dude, you're not the only effing rental company in the country. Like, yeah, there's like challenges of running yours and what city you're in, but like, a lot of cash flow can solve, like, if you invest in it, you can find the right people to put the systems in place and get out of it. But like, you'd have to have that kind of level of cash flow somewhere else. So like, just admitting the fact that you're trapped in it right now because you need the cash flow is fine, but what's the path out? It kind of goes back to like solving it. But I think it's so fascinating. It's like, I have to do this hard work, to your point. And I'm just like, I don't subscribe to that narrative at all. It's like,
which is great.
It's so dysfunctional.
And one of the funny things is, like, if I write a second book, it'll be about parenting with some money, right? So like, how do you like not ruin your kids with money? And one of the things I believe really strongly about my kids is I want there to be a path for them to be and feel successful in life without becoming an investment banker. And really, when I say investment banker, it's shorthand for those like 4 or 5
They
professions.
call it FIRE, right? It's finance and insurance, real estate, and what was
Oh, I like that.
the
Okay.
yeah, it's all pretty much all shit tied to the fiat money printer, which is you go and you suck off all of the fiat leveraged
Yeah,
money. And I mean, there's a
it's
book called
interesting.
back there called Makers and Takers. Have you ever seen this, John?
Oh
Look at
no,
this.
but I
Oh,
love I love reading
you
new
can
books, so
get
I'm gonna write it down.
oh you can get me going, dude. So look at this. Makers and Takers. Look at that picture.
I like it. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna read that book.
We went from like a 0.5% of people tied to those industries to 7 because of the money printing. And the way to actually get ahead, to outpace the money printer, is you got to get into private equity, investment banking, insurance, wealth management. And it's like you're extracting from the value that you and I and the middle market has created. So like, we have to outpace the money printer
That's
somehow
interesting.
with our, yeah, you'd like that a lot. I took 18 pages of notes while I was reading that book.
Yeah, like, and I want my kids to be able to be successful without doing that, and that's what I want to supply them with in life. Um, and I don't know the right way to do that necessarily, but it sounds like the way that you were brought up is like you guys got that figured out in a big way.
It's yeah, it's the reason I'm hesitating is because it has been a painful journey learning this stuff. And like, I can articulate to you now how I'm thinking, but like, while I've been in the middle of it for 15 years, I couldn't have articulated it. I mean, like, I started a podcast. You're part of my 10-year therapy session, right? Like, you have been part of it. Is like, I'm trying to learn, and like, what I'm continuing to lean into is it's how I spend my time delivering value to others while having meaningful relationships and having personal growth. But while I'm delivering value, I need to get paid appropriately, whether it's myself or it's my company, paid appropriately. That, unfortunately, the reality of the world that we live in, we have to outrun the money printer. Like, we have 8% money supply growth a year. So like, technically, if you get in the weighted average cost of capital, where the multiple comes from, the risk-free rate of the 4% is bullshit. I mean, like, the whole thing is actually different when you see the matrix, and like, this thing, we have to grow faster than this. So I think the biggest challenge that I've learned, and why I'm bringing this all up, John, is because like, what I talk about with my kids all the time, they're 8 and we play Monopoly, and I mean, I have them say like, Bitcoin yay, dollar boo, like, over, like, there's a sign right there. And it's like, because like, I don't, they know it's not so I can buy another boat, you guys. It's because I don't want anybody stealing my time. It's just that simple. Don't want anybody stealing my time. And money is a store of how we spent our time. And a company is a leveraged version of that, is in my opinion. So like, it's just about explaining how, like, okay, like, and I think what's harder than ever, John, is finding a company that can deliver valuable goods and services where we feel good about them in a way that doesn't get suffocated by the money printer,
Yeah, yeah,
which is a
it's
hard
hard.
problem to
I
deal
agree.
with. I mean, like, so I don't know. I mean, what do you like? What would you? how are you honing in on like with your kids and like because I think this money thing is a big deal and like company because a company is it's a money machine, right? We're providing goods and services, but it's got so like what would you do differently with your kids or like how are you thinking about it?
Um, I think I try to think about it in a couple ways, and I don't think I've mastered this at all. So this is like provisionally what I'm doing until I learn how to do something better. So number one is I like to have them see how those things work. Because at no point in my childhood, and again, I think this is probably how a lot of people were raised. Like no one took me aside to say like, okay, we're going to the doctor's office today. We're going to Dr. Saylor, the pediatrician down on 10th Street again, because it's time for your checkup. So we're going to pay a $25 copay, but the insurance bills, but Dr. Saylor bills the insurance $150. And like, that's how like, all these things work together. And so
Yeah.
I try to teach them in a way that hopefully makes them curious, like how those things actually work. Like
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
always ask if we watch like a YouTube, it's like, oh, daddy, there's a commercial. Like, why is there a commercial? So we talk about what are the economics of YouTube and all that stuff.
We parent very similar, my friend. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
it.
I want them to understand that. And then the second thing is skills. And like the kids are 9 and 7. So if their skills are like catching fly balls, that's great. That's exactly what being 7 years old is about. But like, ultimately, they've got to have a set of skills to go out and compete. I think that the skill that like not to be a broken record about it, but the skill that's going to be important in the next 20 years is probably AI. So we spend a lot of time fooling around with AI in our house and seeing what the
Mm-hmm.
capabilities
Mm-hmm.
are.
Agreed, and I'm tracking you totally. And I think that this is super interesting because when I think about what is AI, I mean, like, and what I find is here's my belief right now. I'm curious on your thoughts on this because I think this trickles, and I think this is a relevant conversation because if we follow, like, if I pull that thread, it literally comes down to what does it mean to be human and how does the world work, which are the two questions I've been asking myself since I was 4 years old. And so with my kids, it's like, how does the world work? We're talking about how the world works 24/7. Like the public school system can teach them reading, writing, arithmetic. And I don't even know half the shit that they're learning and they're in second grade right now. And like, but it's like, how does the world work? And it's so fascinating because I think about like the jobs and the companies that are going to succeed. Because like I think valuations in different types of companies, back to your point of like you had risk in your company, like people need to be thinking about like what the real risk is. I mean, do you see it last week? I mean, that company that started and created a competitor to DocuSign in 2 days.
I did see that. Yeah. I saw
Wild.
that. Yeah, it's wild. And I've seen companies in industries that I've watched closely where there's like an established company doing $100 million in revenue or whatever, and some guy just like, and I saw this like almost verbatim, like some guy just like signs up for the $20 a month plan, sends the login to his cousin in India, and they've got like 12 guys in India, and just said like, make this, and they just like made it in a month, and so you sell the exact same thing for half price. That's totally wild. Like the thing I'm experimenting with now, like literally right before we got on the phone, I was experimenting with this like voice to code stuff. And that's like totally wild to me. And I just think like all these like huge SaaS companies, DocuSign is a great example. Like no one understands DocuSign because they got like 5,000 people there to make this
I
little
mean, the
app.
valuation
It's
immediately
crazy.
was like, yeah, think about the
Yeah.
valuation of that
Yeah.
company. Now, the fact that so okay, so I think that there's an undertone theme that we're pulling in here because like here I'm curious on your thoughts on how I'm thinking about this too because why I'm so interested, John, is because you have gone through I so resonate with your journey, man. like your whole book, I was just like, this has been I've lived it too, and so what I'm trying to do with other people that listen into this is like, how do we think differently so that if we're placing our bets with time, because that's all we're doing, we're replacing our bets with time and we're trying to get value out of it. And so by thinking through this stuff, I think we have an unbelievable opportunity to potentially reimagine our companies and what we want to do because of where we're at right now. Like the opportunities could be very fascinating, but like kind of throwing in the lens of like depending on what age you are. I mean, the Great Depression 2030, ITR Economics is on my podcast a lot, and like the demographic cliff, the dollar. There's a lot of issues that people need to be paying attention to from the economic perspective. But then with AI and the demographic cliff, I mean, like people can have this amazing opportunity to say like, what do I want to do, and how do I want to provide value? And entrepreneurs disproportionately understand how the world works because of your whole book right here, right? Because they've eaten crap figuring it out. And so here's where I'm thinking about this when you talk about AI. Like, so all of my clients, I mean, the capitalism is free cash flow. So if we can take a three-statement model and say, okay, well, what's the desired free cash flow, and tie all three of the financial statements together and say we do this valuable good or service, then technically, John, if you think about the income statement, you have revenue, which is your value that you're providing to the marketplace, right? It's the good or service that you're providing. And then you have cost of goods and then overhead, which literally think about that. That's costs
That's going to go
and
way down.
overhead.
It's going to go way down.
Well, and like with AI, because I've got this GPT board AI that I'm working for to give my clients. Because like I had my last company was like CFOs. I mean, you couldn't find a good CFO. So now I'm sitting here going like, how about we create a GPT for every single part of the company that's tied to cost of goods or overhead? Like HR, ops, finance, legal, like executive compensation and all this stuff. So you go, okay, well, because as a board, you're just going to go, well, all I'm trying to do is predict the free cash position in the future. And here's what we do as goods or services. And everything should come way down, which should increase the cash flow and the sustainability of your business. But like the number one thing I think becomes the most important part is who's your ideal client and what is the value that you're providing them becomes the differentiator, which I think ties into what, like you said, like we have to think about it, whether we want to sell or not. And like, it's a great opportunity to do that now because it's going to be necessary anyways.
Yeah, I think that entrepreneurs are going to capture vastly disproportionate amounts of wealth in the AI world, which I don't think is good for our society. Like I mean I'm an entrepreneur, and I would prefer that we have more equity in our civilization, but that's not going to happen with AI. Like there's tons of stuff where like I would have hired a young person to do it at one of my companies. That's just not going to happen anymore. Like I don't know how these young people are going to get jobs in the AI world trying to do anything other than AI, honestly.
Which is just meaning that you're prompting the AI to do things, right? Because like going back to like the whole DocuSign thing, like I think about like our old business, we had this shitty software called eAutomate. It cost $350,000 to install it. We were jamming it into our process and procedures, and like instead of just being like, hey, by the way, here's how my company works, here's the process and procedures,
Yeah.
design the software,
Yeah.
the ticketing, the time tracking, and whoop,
It's crazy.
You know,
It's
you
crazy.
got an ERP system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's going to be a wild world.
what do you think is what are you seeing? I mean, like, because are you like in the conversations that you've been having, John? I mean, there's kind of two buckets of people that I've been experiencing. One is there are people that just truly want to get out of that job because they're on more of the retirement age. Not to say that they want to retire, because just like you're saying, like find a different purpose or whatever. And then there's the people that are younger trying to get ahead and use companies as a means of wealth creation. Like what do you see as trends that are that are sticking out for you? I mean, do you seeing any kind of things that are pointing you to how things are going to be unfolding over the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's really interesting. When I think about what do people actually do after they have left their companies, and I go through in the book like a lot of things that people do almost reflexively, like angel investing, that they end up not really liking. And I'm happy to talk about that. That's always a funny story. But I think about the things that people actually did like to do, and there is a lot of room, I think, for entrepreneurs to do like advisory and board work. So I think we'll see a lot more of that. And there's I heard this once from a big private equity guy, and he said that a smart person can learn 90% of an industry in 9 months, and the last 10% takes 20 years. Right. And so like their
Yeah,
point was,
fascinating.
but you can go buy that talent. Right. So I think that if you think about what do companies look like? What do people kind of do with their time? Like I think you'll see a lot of companies where um, we go get like the very best, most experienced person in whatever industry, and then just like build AI around them, and that'll kind of like
Fascinating. I agree. Yeah.
basically just be the company, right? And there might be some outsourcing there too, right? Like I think that like right now the most powerful model is high level expertise with a layer of AI and a layer of low cost
Mm-hmm.
offshoring,
Mm-hmm.
frankly. Now, whether or not like we have, obviously now we're in the world of like tariffs and travel bans and whatever, so that might change. But I think we're gonna see a ton of that. Like real true expertise in a market will be extremely valuable, because AI will just like will create leverage for that.
Oh, super fascinating. I want to unpack this a little bit because okay, so I'm tracking it. So you said that, what do people do afterwards? And it's so funny because whenever I get on a call and then someone sold their business and they're like, hey, can we, there's just ways to work together. And I'm like, and I get on a call with them and I'm like, let me guess. You're looking at board spots, becoming an EOS implementer, or becoming a private equity CEO. And they're like, how'd you know? Because I'm like, what I've learned, John, is like people are just trying to figure out how to get rewarded for the expertise and the value that they have learned in an appropriate way, right? But like without maybe like, we had 115 employees, maybe without 115 people on payroll. So it's like, how can I figure out a way to like give back in a way, but I also want some money to show the value I'm providing. So like, I think what you just said is super fascinating because if you think about the industry, like the expertise that had leveraged AI, like you're talking about. So instead of just going as an EOS implementer or board member, or, some kind of like where you're part of the cog of something else, it's like, hey, well, you could go in there and you could help like create all of the tools behind an industry in an insanely leveraged way. Cause back to like, there's going to be younger people that are buying garage door companies or HVAC companies or this company, but they don't have the expertise. And we want to package up that expertise so they can use it. So I think there's an interesting opportunity for, ex owners who want to give back that is not just a typical, those three
Yeah.
opportunities that I mentioned.
Yeah, that's funny. I talked to a bunch of EOS implementers. I thought about doing that myself. But you're exactly right as to kind of what the psychology of it is. And I think that's what everyone wants. Like I think that's like a universal need to be valued like for what we know and who we are. And that's like one of the hardest things. I think I'd mentioned that like it's one of the hardest things when finally leave your business one way or the other. And suddenly you are not like your tools aren't valued because you're not doing that work. Oftentimes like you can't go do the same thing because you're under a non-compete for a certain amount of time, and you're just kind of like you go from like the top of the world to unemployed person so fast. And the things that you mentioned are the ways that people, I don't want to say cope because like cope makes it seem like a bad thing, but the ways that people are,
Evolve
yeah,
into it.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Cause I think that's why it's like part of what I've been trying to do is like dismantle false choices. Like I think retirement is a false choice. That doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense to
I
me. So
agree.
I
Totally
choose to
agree.
participate. I choose to opt out of that bullshit, or like I choose to opt out of like sell or not sell as a binary thing. It's like my point is like I think to your point, like by thinking, by like truly using our thoughts and spending some time. That's why I love Rob Dubay. Just do nothing. He wrote a book called Do Nothing before you do something dramatic, and it like using AI, like, because like, dude, like it's so fascinating. Because like, they give you my dad's doing tax mitigation right now because he's having fun. He's having meaningful relationships, making an impact, and he's leaning to his passion. And like, he can't type, he can't spell, and like all these things. And I'm like showing him how to use GPT, John, and he's like, I'm like, Dad, you're smarter than 99% of the people. You just don't realize that. Like, what questions to ask. And I'm like, because like, how to manage people. It's like, just instead of the people, it's just
Just yeah,
they're not a robot.
just a machine. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's so fascinating watching him though. It's like watching a kid start to learn to walk. And he's like, this is freaking insane. And I'm like, no, you don't even have to type. You can just talk to it. But like capturing that in a way, but then it'll be interesting as you see, how do you facilitate then that? Because like the way I think about it, John, is like there's this like millions of people that are like, if you think about like when Airbnb started, there was vacant real estate that was available. And I think about this as like, they call it the brain drain. Like we have like insane expertise that's untapped potential sitting in places that they don't want to be. Like, be super fascinating because I know you're a software guy. Like, how do you facilitate like those kind of like matches up where someone needs someone else's expertise? I don't know, man. There's something there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been like, there's a lot of ways where that happens now, like really imperfectly. So, obviously, like being a board member for a private equity firm is the big one. Doing like those like expert calls where you get $500 an hour or whatever to spill the beans on your old industry, like that kind of stuff. But
I haven't heard
it,
about that one.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So like,
That's fascinating.
I don't even know the names of it, but
How does
like
a non-compete factor into that?
well, it's funny. I signed up for one, and I never even get close to my non-compete because that's the last thing I want to have to deal with. But like
Right.
you have to sign like all these forms to do it. It's like, do you have a non-compete with anyone? What does it say? Like you have
Okay,
to
got
just
it. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess what I'm getting at is we haven't perfected how to take this insane level of expertise
Uh-huh.
and really put it to work as efficiently as possible. So like, there's only so many board seats, there's only so many EOS implementers that we need.
And it's not
But
at scale, it's one to one too.
yeah. Yeah, that EOS thing is so fascinating to me. And I know some guys who do that, and I know that the economics are good. There's guys making, six, seven, $8,000 a day on it, which is, obviously really good. If someone figures out a way to automate that meaningfully, like that's gonna be a really good
I,
business.
yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on that. I'll hold back for the moment.
Yeah.
But I think what's fascinating as you think about it, it's like, okay, so let's say you got a couple million people that are retired. Because, like, I mean, back to like, here's my dad's perfect. I mean, he's finally, after 11 years now, he's designed his perfect day. Where like he wants to be valued and work on hard things and meet with really cool people that he can help for like 3 hours a day.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, and like
That's
from
perfect.
and like literally when I say he's living his best life, it's like, Dad, what are you doing? Oh, I'm leaf blowing, and then I'm going to Home Depot, and then I've got 3 tax mitigation calls. I'm like, you died and went to heaven, didn't you? So like, it's not that he wants to do nothing, but how do we tap into those people that are not providing those 3 hours to give expertise to people that need it? And like, because what I have, like, I was on one of my group calls, John, and like I was projecting on a lot of my clients, and then I straight up have been asking people, I'm like, raise your hand if you're completely and utterly exhausted with the sheer level of incompetence of advisors and consultants who are taking your money but not having any skin in the outcome. Everybody
Everybody.
raises their
Yeah.
hands. Yeah, everyone. And so the difference between an advisor and a consultant and an entrepreneur, who like the outcome is you either have more time, more cash flow, more equity, or you don't. And we all know that because we either have more cash in our checking account or we don't. We either have more time or we don't. And so, like, I think back to then, like, even the AI stuff, John, it's like the number one skill set with AI is understanding the outcome. So, like, there's all these people that are, that you're talking about and you interviewed and I've interviewed. It's like, how do we take those people and then help because they understand the outcomes that people are striving for and can back into it and eliminate that bloat that's in the middle of there. And it's not just sitting in Vistage or EO or like there's like something where it's like you have to have that like back to the board because I'm on a couple boards where it's like we either are making free cash flow or we're not, and everything has to drive around that. And then hopefully it's conscious capitalism in a good way. But I don't know, man, there might be something for you to noodle on there because I think there's a lot of untapped resources there.
Yeah, I think there is, and one of the things I had noodled on was trying to create a database of people who had sold businesses and still want to do something else. And then I don't know what I would do with the database, but it'd be cool to have it.
I would provide you with like potentially thousands of names. I mean, because I'm sitting there, same thing. And like I chose with my business to go with a leverage coaching program. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Taki Moore, $1 Million Coach. That's so like I kind of had this split with like, do I have a certification program like EOS? And I was like, I don't want to deal with a bunch of that shit. And so then it was like, it's leverage coaching with content for my model. But like, so there's all these people that I've interviewed and talked to for 10 years where it's like, they're just looking for something to do. So like, I don't know, man.
It's interesting. There's a guy's name is Russ, and he's like, it's funny because he's entered my life at really opportune times. So he gave me my first job out of graduate school, and his business is Expert Witness. And his story, he tells it better than I'll ever tell it, but his story was, he and a bunch of buddies were working consulting, and they said, there's all these professors who have so much expertise, but like you're a professor at like University of Dayton or whatever, and you're literally the world's expert at like soil science or whatever, like the number
Yeah,
one
yeah,
expert
yeah,
in the
yeah.
world, but you're making 75 grand, right? And like you deal with students all day. So they said, let's get all the professors in a database and then something will happen. And what eventually happened, yada, 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 was they created basically the beginning of the expert witness location industry. So for,
No
you're
way.
going to do like a trial and you have to have an
Yeah.
expert witness. That's how you find it. And his story is fascinating because he created this business, sold it to a strategic, went and did other stuff for like 10 years, and then bought the business back.
Of
So he
course.
literally
Right.
today like runs the same business as like how I mean, maybe he's 50 years old as when he was 20, but it's just like I had
Yeah.
like a 10-year break in there. And anyway,
But
long
there,
story
yeah,
short,
I see it.
databases are very valuable. And also I think it's a cool story about that guy.
Oh, I love it. But I think you're like, there's something here, man. Like, cause I mean, why, why I think there's something here is it really puts a container around everything that we've talked about, which is your book, people like wanting meaning. They obviously people need various forms of liquidity. I mean, like to your point, like what Bo says, like you're gonna end up selling your company. Either you pass it on to your kids, and like there's gonna be a rare set of circumstances where the cash flow in the industry will provide for decades and decades and decades, especially in a world of disruption. So having a way to like a plan to monetize it, and then how the like so like all the stuff that you're talking about, or like it kind of hones into like what do you want to do, and what value can you provide, and there's ways to monetize that. And I think there's going to be more interesting ways that we've seen in a long time.
Can't wait to see it. Yeah, I think interestingly, and this just popped in my mind. So this is like half a thought, but if you think about like how AIs are getting trained, like if you wanted to train an AI to be your accountant or whatever, like you'd have to go get like the most expert people in tax law and accounting and whatever else, and you'd have to use it to train it. So like who's training these models? Like that could be an interesting way
Do you
to
even
put that
need,
into
but
the
like,
world.
okay, understood, but like, do you even need to? And here's why, because like, here's what I've learned is like, if you know what the outcome is that you're trying to describe, it already knows all the technical shit. Their
It does.
PhD
Yeah,
levels and everything. So like, it's like, okay, well, here's
that's a
what I'm
good
trying to
point.
do. I'm trying to build out a comp plan with John. And what we're going to do is we're going to have him be 250 base. Then we're going to have 100,000 or 40% of his base tied to the annual bonus plan of working capital, payables, receivables, inventory. And we're going to want average days of an average turn. And then what we want is free cash flow. And like, so like by describing what that is, and then saying, well, by the way, we also want a phantom stock plan tied to that, which is, the 5 years. Here's my point of just this nuanced example is like, here's all of this architecture. And what it is well, the owner needs to make their free cash flow distribution free to quality. And then we have this topic or this specific thing. And then for the long term phantom stock, it's normalized EBITDA times the multiple. And then there's the debt and the working capital. If we can describe all that, I just tell the GPT to build me a contract for that and an employment contract. And now the attorney, like you start going like, and I actually had this whole thread, John, with GPT. I'm like, if we know all of, like the outcome, do we need like, can we do most of these advisors' jobs from the CPA to the attorney to the wealth manager? And it's like, your thesis is generally correct, Ryan.
I think your thesis is very correct. Um, and like you can like so one of the things I've been doing over the past few months is like for the past like 4 months, like I got like this like virus last year and I've been feeling like crappy for like 4 months straight. And so I go to the doctor can't figure it out. So I started to do a bunch of research. Like I read like papers, right? I read like real medical research papers, and like okay, like this is kind of slow. So I put all my research papers into Chat GPT, and so now I can just like ask it questions about like
You know
literally
where to
the
look. You're
best
connecting
research.
dots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I love my doctor. My doctor is literally a genius, the best doctor I've ever had. But at the same time, he's not going to read like 50 academic papers like specific to me. And like now I have that, and it took like an hour to put it together for free.
I plugged in, I know. And back to like, but you knew what, okay. So you knew what the outcome was that you were searching for, right? And it's like the prompting of just constantly asking different ways to get to that outcome. And what I find so fascinating about entrepreneurs and what the theme is of this conversation is by understanding the outcome of business, which is free cash flow, and you need to be delivering value to your clients, and the operations is a means to delivering that value. everyone knows how to ask these questions. And so whether it's building the software to optimize that, or if it's providing advice or comp plans or this or that, or whatever the hell it is, like the tool can do it.
The tool can do it.
And like,
That's right.
they can do it now,
Yeah.
man. Like it's insane. And I go like, and like, John, I think about it, like the people not thinking about this. I'm just like, holy shit. Like this is going to happen. Like you ever listened to the Gary Vaynerchuk quote where he's like, there was that one day where this guy bought 40,000 horses and was like, yes, the same day the Model T rolled off the line. And like, but I find fascinating for people that have exited that don't have an infrastructure. Like, I mean, that's me, right? Like I don't have 100 and some employees now. And like, there's no one telling me I can't use it like this. Yeah, so like, exactly like the middle market has like more opportunity because no one's telling you what to do and you're used to breaking rules.
Yeah.
Whereas like these bigger companies, I got a buddy at a software company, he's like, we're not allowed to use it. I'm like, you're so effed.
I've seen a lot of companies that are like that. And same reaction. And I think the number one place you're going to see it is in the SaaS world. Like, I think you're going to see a bunch of these software services, exactly like you're saying with DocuSign, like where, they charge $5,000 a month, and like no CEO, no CFO is going to look at that and be like, oh, okay, we can just replace it with this other thing for $19 a month that like these two kids made. That's going to happen constantly.
How many to-do apps do you need, or productivity tools, or this, or I mean,
yeah, like people are paying like thousands of dollars for like Notion or whatever. Like that's going to get ripped off in someone's weekend.
And back to, I think that all of this stuff is tied together, which is your book of like thinking through what do you want. Right. I mean, like the success to significance, you mentioned that too. And just like thinking about this stuff, I think is so important, and spending the time, because it's the whole, like, how did you say? Like, we have to go a little bit slower to go fast. You cut down, if you're going to get 6 hours to cut it down, spend the 4 hours to sharpen it up. And I think that, sitting down to read a book like yours about someone that's been through the whole cycle is really important right now, because I think that time will be completely rewarded that people spend.
I think so too.
Man, this has been super fun. I have really enjoyed getting caught up. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you like, any kind of?
No, this is great. I love to have these kind of like wide ranging discussions, and it's always nice to see you and to talk to your audience a little bit too.
Go pick up your book. Any place that people can find you. I don't know if you're having conversations with people thinking about selling or that have sold and trying to figure out what can I do. John, can you help me?
Yeah. So the book is Beyond the Exit. It's on Amazon. If you buy it, leave me a 5-star review, please. And then you can put my contact. I'll send you my contact info. Put it in the show notes. People reach out to me all the time. I do a little bit of coaching. I coach like 3 or 4 folks at once that are kind of pre-exit to work them through the process they have in the book. So that's fun. If anyone's interested in that. But other than that, I love to hear from entrepreneurs. Love to hear their stories.
Create a database, man.
I may create a database.
I want to see you have this, like, it's like Bumble for entrepreneurs and ideas.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
John, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. We'll see you.